All right, we got to begin with this. The international community is reacting to President Trump's statement that the United States should take over the Gaza Strip. He made the comments during a joint news conference with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday. The president laid out a plan to move millions of Palestinians who live there and develop the area. Listen.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site.
CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi is live from Washington. Olivia, the reaction that we're hearing from world leaders, including our allies, are not in favor of what the president is suggesting. Has the White House had any reaction to what the rest of the world is saying?
Yeah, good morning to you, Vlad. No reaction from the White House just yet on the reaction from the international community to Trump's remarks last night. But it's important to remember that before he even made those remarks about the U.S. takeover of Gaza, our allies in the region had already rejected the idea of relocating those more than 2 million Palestinians out of Gaza. I just want to read to you some of the reaction we saw from our closest allies in the region. Egypt's foreign ministry last night said that the rebuilding of Gaza stressed the need for rebuilding Gaza without moving Palestinians out of the country. Saudi Arabia, one of our most important allies in that region, also Trump called the Crown Prince as his first phone call of his second administration. They released a statement last night, a very strongly worded statement, that called for an independent Palestinian state and said it would be a firm, steadfast, and unwavering position of that kingdom. So important to note that all of our allies in that region are firmly against what Trump is proposing here. But take a listen to what Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, said this morning to CBS about why this is the U.S. position currently.
When you have 2 million people living on what has become miles of rubble that's completely unlivable, to say we're going to rebuild with them sitting there, I think is incredible. Just again, the reality of it is incredibly difficult. But back to your point on Hamas, and this is where we have a shared vision and we have shared objectives with the Israeli government. Hamas cannot stay there.
The argument we've been hearing from the White House that there's no way to rebuild Gaza while the Palestinian people are still there. But obviously our allies in the region say there's nowhere else for them to go, and they are in favor of them staying there while that rebuilding process is ongoing.
So the reason why Gaza is in rubble, and let's separate the actions of the terrorist organization Hamas from the Palestinian people who are now returning to the rubble, is because the Israelis have leveled it in their attempt to root out Hamas. Mike Waltz's statement that the people are living in these conditions and why wouldn't they want to live in better conditions, certainly that's absolutely true. But to secure that part of the world, you will need boots on the ground and perhaps not Israeli boots. So is the Trump administration preparing to send U.S. troops to Gaza, given that, as you know, Olivia, having covered the campaign, part of his campaign statements and rallies and slogans had to do with the United States taking a step back from meddling in international affairs with the U.S. military?
It's an excellent point, Vlad. Trump's not ruling it out right now. Even last night, he said, as far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what's necessary. If it's necessary in regards to bringing troops there, he said, we'll do that. But as you point out, this is the most isolationist president we've had in the last several decades. So for him to say something like we would meddle in those affairs and send troops over there certainly doesn't square with where he has been previously on a lot of international issues. So really important distinction to note there, but it's certainly something that would require a little bit more than just an executive order or a writing of the pen to send troops over there. This would require an act of Congress, an authorized use of military force, something that Democrats have been calling for in Congress, saying that if that's something he wants to do and to go down that route, then he needs to go over to Capitol Hill and plead his case.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi reporting from Washington for us this morning. Thanks, Olivia. For more international reaction to the president's statements, I want to bring in CBS News contributor Robert Berger. Robert, you just heard from Olivia some of the reaction we've received from not only our allies in the Middle East, but from others all around the world. I'm curious if the Jordanians, the Egyptians, and others in the region say, and have been on the record for many, many years, saying that they cannot absorb an influx of Palestinian immigrants into their countries, into those nations, where are those people to go?
Yeah, well, that's the big question. And, Jordan and Egypt really aren't in a position to take hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza, even though they do have a lot of land in the Sinai Peninsula and Jordan. Their economies couldn't absorb hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. And then, of course, there's the danger of radicalization of that population, which could bring instability to those U.S. allies. So that is the question. There really is no place for them to go. But I suppose President Trump is thinking, well, let's offer them a place to go. And instead of rubble in Gaza, that they can get an apartment somewhere. But of course, you need the cooperation of U.S. allies to do that.
So, Robert, I'm curious what the reaction within Israel has been. We know what the Saudis are saying, what the Egyptians are saying. We've had reaction from Turkey. We've certainly had reaction from China. And again, it just sort of makes me think about how things kick off throughout world history, right? Things that may seem to be moments that require sort of thoughtful thinking and geopolitical strategy end up being minor flicks of flame that turn into world wars. And so I'm just curious what people are saying within Israel about the possibility, for example, of U.S. troops entering Gaza to somehow remove 2 million people from that part of the world.
Yeah, as far as U.S. troops, I think there hasn't been a lot of reaction to that because people in Israel don't really see that happening right away. But as far as the concept of the idea of displacing or, removing these 1.5 million or 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to other countries, that's gotten some positive reaction in the Israeli government, which is a right-wing government. The far right says, let's put to bed the idea of a Palestinian state and move out the Palestinians. But even more moderates in that government from Netanyahu's Likud party think it's time to start thinking outside the box. And we've even heard some centrist opposition members saying this idea is worth considering, at least as a starting point.
So then if it's not U.S. troops on the ground, then we're, I guess, essentially speculating that it would be Israeli troops that would somehow be taking part in whatever this looks like. I can't imagine what it looks like to forcibly remove 2 million people from a region. And so what does that mean for the very delicate treaties that exist between the Israeli government and other countries, for example, like Egypt and Saudi Arabia? If the idea of a two-state solution is completely off the table, I wonder what happens then.
Yeah, I mean, that is going to be a problem as far as President Trump's his vision is to bring in Saudi Arabia and extend the Abraham Accords, which happened under his previous administration, peace with countries like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. He wants to extend that to Saudi Arabia. They've said that that won't happen without a Palestinian state being created. But, it's possible that once the shock, this is sort of a shock and awe kind of a proposal. And maybe now it'll be at least a starting point for some kind of discussion and trying to find some way to reach a solution that might not include at least the traditional idea of a Palestinian state. But as we've said, that's not acceptable to the Arab world right now.
And so has there been any appetite, Robert, for perhaps a different approach, one that was taken by the United States and her allies in the wake of World War II? Mortal enemies, the United States, Germany, United States, Japan, are allies, rather than forcibly removing the Japanese from their homeland, or what the United States did under the Marshall Plan was to try and rebuild those countries, try to bring about a sense of government much like our own. And they were, as you know, were wildly successful in doing that. Is there any appetite for something like that where we say, hey, let's rebuild Gaza, let's put hotels up if that's the plan, but let's do that with the intention of keeping the Palestinians, those who live in Gaza, there?
That was actually the idea under the Biden administration. Nobody talked about removing a couple of million Palestinians from their homes. And so the idea was, who is going to rule Gaza after Hamas? Now, Hamas, by the way, still hasn't agreed to step down, and it's still in power, as we've seen from the recent hostage releases. Hamas is still in control. So the idea of the Biden idea was to get an alternative government in there, including, maybe some Arab states and the Palestinian Authority. But we heard President Trump say last night that the Palestinian Authority has failed in the West Bank, and he doesn't see a role for it in Gaza.
All right, Robert Berger, always great to have your insight, your analysis, and your reporting, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thanks.